Welcome again to Authors Recommend Books. I'm Bradley Verdell, author of Victorian fiction and steampunk, and I hope you will read my Chadwick Yates series and other books that I've got coming out soon. And you are? Who are you?
My name is Mark Will.
Recurring guest on the show. And what do you like to write, Mark, and how can people support you and read your work?
Well, they can buy my books.
Yeah.
On Amazon.
Will be linked
yes.
in the description, which is where you can find mine as well as the books we're going to recommend today. And your books are very diverse. You've got, poetry, and you've got translation, and you've got, general fiction, and yeah, it's great. A lot of transgressive stuff over here.
That's
okay,
right.
Anyway, what we do, as you may know, is that we recommend a nonfiction book and a fiction book that we've read and we like and we think that you will enjoy as well. And these are not paid promotions. We don't get any money from the books that we recommend. Even if you go in the description and you click the link and buy the books that we recommend, we don't get any money from that. We're just doing this because we love reading and we love books, and we hope you'll buy our books if you want to support us, because that's really the way you can support us. So I am going to go first, as usual, but I'm not doing nonfiction. Usually I do nonfiction, he does fiction, but today I'm going to do fiction. And
I'm doing nonfiction.
And you're doing nonfiction. That's right.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. I
What's
should be
happening?
sitting in that chair, actually.
Yeah.
I should be. That's what it should be. But I'm going to do one of my favorite authors of all time, one of my canonical authors, as you would say, where you just got to read everything he's written, and that man is Jules Verne. And I'm going to talk about not 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I'm not going to talk about Around the World in 80 Days. I'm not going to talk about some of his other more famous Journey to the Center of the Earth or stuff like that. I'm going to talk about From the Earth to the Moon, which is, in two words, fucking hilarious. It's just hilarious. Like, you've got to read this to understand hilarious. I was laughing my ass off the whole way through it. It's a fantastic book. I'm not partial to sci-fi. I'm just gonna level with you. I know some good sci-fi writers. I even personally know a good sci-fi writer, J.J. Green, and I've read her books, and she's great. But I've just, sci-fi is just not really my thing. But what is my thing? Victorian era, 19th century, fantasy, steampunk. And, some people define steampunk as retrofuturism, or in other words, sci-fi set in the past.
Yeah.
This is certainly some sci-fi set in the past. This is going to the moon with, 1860s technology. And it sounds completely plausible, but, when you're reading it with what we know scientifically now, it just becomes hilarious beyond all doubt. But let me get into why I like it so much. Jules Verne is a Frenchman, as we know, and in a lot of his books, he's said to really capture the spirit of the English. As an outside observer, he seems to really be able to have these English characters who are like a caricature of an Englishman, but also a flattering caricature of an Englishman. Well, in this book, one of our protagonists, is Impy Barbicane, which is a fantastic name. I feel like I could name my son, like Impy Barbicane Verdell. That would be fantastic. Pure-blooded Yankee, this guy. And Barbicane, I would say, is a flattering... Well, the whole book is a flattering caricature of America. Like, there's some things... he really... His outside look at the American spirit is so hilarious, and even in a modern context, because it starts out with the Baltimore Gun Club, and the Baltimore Gun Club is a group of artillerists. Am I saying it right?
Sounds right.
Artillery people from the Civil War era, and they are. Most of them are. He says at one point they've calculated that there's not quite. I think it's not quite one arm among 4 people, and about an average of 2 legs among 6 people. They're all artillery people, so they all have these like amputations and wounds and stuff. And some of it just defies belief. It sort of reminds me of when you were talking about Autumn of the Patriarch and the kind of magical real. Like one person has a gutta percha skull, and it's like, how did you survive the destruction of your skull? And they replaced it with gutta percha. So there's people like one of the guys, J.T. Maston, at the gun club, they're sitting around because they've spent their whole lives developing better and better cannons, which is so American, right? Better and better artillery. And now the war is over, and they are pissed off that there's no one to fight. And one guy has a hook for a hand, and he's clawing at the wooden arm of his chair, and he's scratching his silver cranium, and they're all angry because they don't have anything to do. And the suggestion is brought up, hey, didn't America once belong to England? And they say, yeah. And he said, maybe it's time for England to belong to America. And they say, no, we can't do that. So the president of the gun club, MP Barbicane, calls a meeting. And the meeting is such a caricature, too. His chair is on like a 32, like a mortar, but like the base is like a field gun carriage, right? And they say the table is just an iron sheet that's supported by 6 carronades. And they have candelabras that are made of muskets. And the walls are interlaced with guns on the wall, which is such a funny American thing, you know? And Barbicane decides, we're going to go to the moon. That's what we need to conquer. And because at this time, the idea of using a rocket, like you would think they're going to make a spaceship and go to the moon, that's not how they do it. They launch, they use a space cannon, basically. They're going to create a giant cannon and shoot a projectile to the moon. And it's brilliant. And Jules Verne, in classic Verne style, goes through all the science of it. Now, what's creepy about this is that less than 100 years later, 3 people, all American, left Florida, went to the moon, went around the moon, and came and landed in the Pacific Ocean, which is almost exactly what happens in this book. 3 people in a space capsule, they leave from Florida, they drop in the Pacific Ocean, and he called the spaceship the Columbiad, which is why the Columbia was called the Columbia. It was in tribute to Verne. Wow. Yeah, exactly, because this was kind of his idea. But what they do is, once this proposition is taken up, yes, we're going to the moon, and they think they're going to make it the 36th state of the United States. It's going to be the moon. And he has these hilarious lines like, when one American has an idea, he immediately finds another American to share it with. They decide who's going to be president and vice president. Then they get another American, they have a secretary. Once they have a 4th American, they have a treasurer, and the club is started, you know. And he also says, nothing is impossible to Americans. You know, once they have an idea, they just do it. So it's a very flattering caricature, even with the gun obsession and everybody sitting around angry because there's no war and, you know, picking at their wounds and stuff. But they basically work out, with the help of the Cambridge Observatory, that they need an exit velocity of, 12,000 yards per second, and they're going to have to leave from, I think it's whatever the parallel is. They can only choose Florida or Texas because they have to be on a certain latitude, and that's the only places in the United States at the time where they have this latitude available.
Well, that's where the space program is based
exactly, because Jules Verne was on top of his stuff. I mean, he got it as right as you could get it in that time period,
That's amazing.
And, yeah, it's amazing. And he talks about, he even works out, there's, because the moon, he talks about the orbit of the moon and how, look, if you're going to launch a space cannon, you have to shoot it at the right time, and you have to account for how long it takes it to get there and make sure it lands in the right, place and all this stuff. So basically they decide you have to do it this December, on this day, at this time. And if you miss this time, you have to wait 18 years before you get another shot. So that's so the book is this race to get the funds and figure the science out by, I think it's December 4th in the book, is the day they have to launch. If they don't, they have to wait 18 years. And they use, basically, they make a hole in the ground, 900 feet deep. He goes into the details of how you would create enough furnaces, and they basically cast a giant cannon in the earth, and then they pack it with gun cotton, which is nitrocellulose. They pack it with this stuff, then they put the projectile in, and then they launch into space. And there's a lot of funny things about, people want to see the project, but they're walking around the pit, like, smoking cigars, and there's, like, millions of pounds of nitrocellulose in this thing, and it's hilarious. But the other thing is the three men who go on the ship, there's an interesting dynamic between them. So there's Impey Barbicane, the president of the gun club. His rival is an armorer. So they have this professional rivalry where I make a cannon, you make armor that can stop it. I make a cannon that can pierce it, you make, it's this war, this arms race, basically, right? And they've never met personally. And this guy, Captain Nickel, makes, I think it's a $15,000 bet. He just doesn't want the gun club to succeed. So he's like, this much money if the thing doesn't make it off the ground. This much money if this, and all this. And Barbicane writes him back a letter, one line, done. I'll bet it, But eventually, Nicole comes down to Florida, and they arrange to have a duel in a forest. So they're like, you enter one side of the forest with your rifle, I'll enter the other side of the forest with my rifle, and we'll just see who comes out. And a Frenchman, I believe it's Frenchman, Michael Ardon, has shown up, and he is not a scientist. But he wants to be the first person to go to the moon. So at this point, at the beginning of the book, they're thinking, we just want to send a projectile to the moon. And he talks about, if we have this kind of telescope, we build a telescope in the Rockies to these dimensions, it will make the moon appear as if it's only 5 miles away. At that distance, we can see any object whose diameter is more than 9 feet. Anything that's more than 9 feet in diameter, we can see it. Mm-hmm. So they just want to see if they can get something to the moon.
Right.
But Arden's like, I'll go. I want to be the one to go. And he intercedes in this duel, and Barbicane and Nickel become friends, and it ends up being two scientists and just a passionate, adventurous Frenchman who knows nothing about science going to the moon. And the things they pack are hilarious. Like, They assume that there will be life on the moon, that there are selenites, and I think he refers to a belief at the time period that everyone on Earth has like a double on the moon, right? And they also think, he's like, well, we can't see anything up there. And they're like, no, because the moon is shaped like an egg, and we can only see the small end. But because gravity would pull all the atmosphere to the end that we can't see. So they're just assuming...
The dark side of the moon.
Yeah, the dark side of the moon, exactly. So they take, seeds, they take guns because they don't know what they're going to encounter, they might have to hunt. And because they have no way back, the plan is, we'll go to the moon, and then every year or so, if the cannon can shoot once, it can shoot again. Just send us supplies, but we'll have to live the rest of our life on the moon. But just, send us food, send us this, we'll come up with a code, we'll be able to send signals back and forth, and all this stuff. And it's so, it's just wonderful. It makes me wish that I could imagine that. It makes me wish I lived in a time period where people could really hope and believe. Yeah, there's selenites living on the moon, and there's moon cattle and moon, because they're thinking, well, what if we don't like the taste of the fish on the moon? Or what if, I'm sure there's going to be food for us there, but who knows what odd things we could find up there.
Selenites is a great term.
It is a great term.
So what do they call the Frenchman that is willing to go to the moon?
What do they call him? I mean, his name is Michael Ardon.
I know, but do they have a term for him too, like astronaut or cosmonaut? Or?
No, I don't think so. But it is interesting to note that in referring to the first ever usage of the word spaceship was in, I believe it's the Pall Mall Gazette in 1880, and they were referring to Verne's Columbia. They're referring to the fictional spaceship, and they call, because he never calls it a spaceship, because it's a space cannon, basically. I mean, it's a projectile. It's basically a giant bullet in his mind, right? And by the way, I think NASA looked at the technical feasibility of a space cannon and figured out that it wouldn't work. I think the closest that's ever been tried, it reached like 30-something% of the necessary escape velocity. But see, Verne thought, actually, when you get out of the atmosphere, you experience anti-gravity, right? Mm-hmm. In Verne's book, there's a point of equilibrium. So they feel gravity in the spaceship until they reach one point, and there's no gravity, and then they're at then they get the gravity of the moon pulling them in. So he didn't, he got a lot of things wrong because, they still believed in aether and stuff at this time period. So, but it's hilarious, it's hilarious. Like the way that they're like, well, what about oxygen? It's going to be a long flight. What are we going to do about oxygen? It's like, no, but they just hand wave it away. They're like, oh, that's not a problem. And they use two chemical processes. I think it's I might get this wrong because I left my notes. I left my notes at the office, but it's like chloride of potassium. If you heat it up, releases oxygen. And he talks about, it's 7 pounds of oxygen, so that's this many cubic feet, and that'll keep us alive for a day. And then they use caustic potash absorbs carbon dioxide. So they use two kind of Victorian chemistry processes, one to suck the carbon dioxide away, one to generate oxygen. And another interesting thing though is Verne was always on what was cutting edge at the time. Aluminum was cutting edge at this time period, and they work out, we're going to make the spaceship out of aluminum. He's like, well, isn't that absurdly expensive? Oh no, the price has come down. It's $9 a pound. $9 a pound, and they end up spending, in 1860-ish dollars, something like $5 million is what it called. The U.S. government gives them $4 million, and contributions from all these other countries come in. They get over $1 million US in country, and DD has a whole list of this country gave this much and this country gave that, and England didn't give a penny because they were jealous. And but like Turkey gives money because they have a very strong interest in the moon because it controls the feast of Ramadan, so they need to it's so interesting. It's very multicultural and interesting in that way, and who gives how much for what, and everybody's willing to help. All these scientific organizations write in and, yes, congratulations, and anything you need, we'll make it happen for you. And the book ends with them taking off, and the sequel, Round the Moon, came out later. So there's actually 2 books. At the end of the first book, you don't really know what happened. But I'll spoil one thing about the second book. It's absolutely hilarious. When they need to get rid of something from the spaceship, they just open the window, throw it out, and close it really quick. Like, don't let too much air out. Oh, and they take 2 dogs, which is also interesting because dogs were one of the first animals to go to space. So that was correctly predicted. And Ardon wants to take all these other animals, and they can't take them because it's too much space. But their spaceship is like, it's sort of like if you read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's like they have like a pipe organ and a smoking room on the submarine, which like, we got nuclear powered submarines now, but they don't have like a pool and a ballroom and a smoking room and a piano in them,
You gotta have that.
Oh yeah, you gotta have that. Like, that's what I love about steampunk, So in Verne's piece, it's like the spaceship itself, like it's like it's like a little Victorian, parlor in there, and they got a gas light for heat and warmth and everything, and they take brandy and they take, I think, 2 months supply of water because they'll get the rest of the water they need when they get to the moon, because of course there's plenty of water on the moon and all this stuff. And extremely entertaining read. If you're a sci-fi fan, I think you would love it for the hilarity. If you're a historical fiction or steampunk fan, you're gonna love it. And it's such a funny, like I said, flattering caricature of America and Americans and the American spirit, I think, really captured by Verne. But I couldn't stop laughing through the book, and it is a page turner. Like, you'd just be like, oh, I can't, like, what are they going to do next? Like, how are they going to solve this problem?
Yeah.
And it's always like, oh, of course, we'll just do this, no problem. So that's the fiction department for today. What do you got in the nonfiction department?
Nonfiction, well, during the last episode I talked about my interest in literature related to a particular locale.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the spirit of place. Also mentioned last summer I took the grand tour of Europe.
Right. We heard about Berlin last time.
Yeah. So next stop, Prague.
Okay.
And
that's the Ukraine, right?
No.
Prague is
Czech
Prague.
Republic.
Czech Republic.
Yeah.
Okay. Why did I think? Never mind.
I don't know.
I get confused with certain.
Okay. No, we're still in Western Europe.
Okay, got it.
Well,
All right.
I mean, that's, I guess, the Czech Republic is technically Eastern Europe, but not that far east.
That's the one I always get confused.
Okay. I'm sidetracked now.
Sorry. It's like,
Anyway, for me, when I think of Prague, I think of one of my canonical authors, Franz Kafka.
okay, yeah.
And so his presence is everywhere in that city. There's a Kafka museum, which is fantastic. There are various sculptures of Kafka around town, including a kinesthetic sculpture. It's a sculpture that moves. It's like a head of Kafka, but they're these moving pieces. I've got a picture of that. Maybe we can put it up here.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
There's a Kafka hotel, and on and on. I mean, it's become a bit absurd. Actually, there's so many like touristy, uses of his name.
Yeah.
But when I was there, it was special for me because I had read, descriptions of the place in his works, and then visiting, and then rereading some of his material. It deepens that appreciation and the connection that one has to the place that one has read about. But anyway, when I was in Prague, I didn't find any books to purchase that were related to Kafka. But then,
is it easy to get English books there?
I didn't really visit any English bookstores. We went to some museums, and there's always signage in English. Yeah. So I imagine if I had gone looking for English books, I could have found some. But I don't know, for various reasons, I didn't do that. But when I got to Paris and visited Shakespeare and Company, and I'll have something to say about Paris in a later episode, I found this book that I had to purchase. It's called Is That Kafka? 99 Finds. So this book was written by Kafka's biographer. So a guy that had recently written a fairly well-received biography of Kafka. During the research, he came across all of these personal items, artifacts that assisted him in his writing project, of course, but also he felt they were unique and interesting enough to be included in this separate work. So the 99 finds are these artifacts that tell us something about Kafka. So that they're letters, they're diaries, postcards, drawings, photographs, manuscripts, and various other, realia, like an advertisement for one of his first publications. So anyone interested in Kafka would definitely be interested in this book. The general reader might not be as interested, but if you love Kafka, you might want to check it out. So the major sections of the book are idiosyncrasies, emotions, reading and writing, slapstick, illusions, elsewhere, reflections, and the end. So he organizes these 99 artifacts into these various sections, and then he has a picture. There, illustrations and photographs in here, and then a description of what the artifact is and what its significance is. So some of these finds have funny titles. I'll share a few. Kafka cheats on his exams. So that's from, when he was in school. Kafka drinks beer. Kafka's favorite song. What color were Kafka's eyes?
What was Kafka's favorite song?
I'll have to look it up.
Oh, okay.
Kafka's no prude. Kafka goes whoring. Kafka writes in Hebrew. Kafka's wills.
Okay.
Kafka writes in Hebrew. That section was interesting. His familiarity with Jewish literature. I learned quite a bit about that. Of course, I knew that was an important influence, but it was more significant than I originally thought. And another important thing I learned, Kafka incorporated into his major works typical slapstick elements and physical comedy, which he probably drew from early silent films. So I didn't know that he was like an early silent film enthusiast, and so some of the slapstick scenes that he saw, you can see them in The Trial, for example, and so his biographer believes that these elements were derived from early silent films.
Silent films, wildly entertaining, by the way. That stuff is hilarious and just fascinating. But go on.
Well, I mean, it's quite plausible that this was the inspiration for some of those elements in his work. So, I don't have much more to add. I would just say that if you are a Kafka enthusiast, you might enjoy this. But if you're a general reader and you're not interested in Kafka, you might find it a bit tedious. But since he's a canonical author for me, I have to recommend it to my fellow Kafkans or Kafkaites.
Yeah. Okay. The author of this, you said, is Kafka's biographer, right? Have you read any of this author's other stuff?
No, I should read the biography next, but it's quite a tome. I think it's 3 volumes.
Oh wow!
So
that's a lot.
I thought instead of reading the 3-volume biography, I'll just get some of the details from this. I think I'm probably good for now.
How are you with biographies in general? Because as much as I love history, I find, like, I think 3 of the books in this past year that I put down and didn't finish were biographies. Yeah, okay. I read a biography of Daniel Boone that I just couldn't get into. I was reading a biography of Edward VII that I just couldn't get. I don't know. I feel like I'm more likely to stop reading biographies than almost anything else.
Well, I like biographies, as I mentioned in a previous episode. I especially like rock biographies, musical biographies or autobiographies. So I devour those. Biographies of literary personages. I usually enjoy those too. For whatever reason, I like to know biographical details about authors that I like and appreciate. So, yeah.
Maybe I'll do a biography next time, just because I enjoy so few biographies. The ones that I like must be awesome, right? So all right, good stuff. Well, thank you for joining us again. Remember to, if you want to support us, you can find Mark's works, or if you want to follow him on social media, all of his stuff is down in the description. Same for me. If you want to check out my website or follow me on Facebook or read my books, you can find all that in the description. Also, the books that we've recommended will be down in there. Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with all your friends and all your enemies.